His latest book, that is Gita for Work and Life. Thereupon, we heard from Arun Myra on his journey of life. A very interesting conversation unfolded here on the stage with two doyens of industry and leadership. Duologue with Barun Das in conversation with Gursharan Das and R. Gopal Krishnan, both of whom are here with us on day 2 as well. And finally, we ended the day with our first author session yesterday, which is Rupa Kudwa and Mamta Binani in conversation with Ajay Bandopadhyay, who's the convener for Business and Economy Literature Festival. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to day 2 of BELF. We begin this morning with a leadership idea that challenges hierarchy, redefines power, places care, ethics, and responsibility at the center of decision-making. Our first speaker this morning is Professor R.P. Banerjee. Professor Ramaprasad Banerjee is a distinguished academic. He is a leadership thinker, a prolific author, and widely recognized for pioneering ethics and values in management education. With over 3 decades of international teaching experience, his work integrates Indian wisdom to contemporary leadership thinking, with a strong focus on ethical governance and stress management. He's also the chairman and director of EIILM Kolkata and founder of EIILM Center for Leadership and Ethics, and author of influential books like Mother Leadership, Corporate Leadership, The Vedic Way, Vedic Economy, and Ethics in Business and Management. He is in conversation with S.K. Dutt. S.K. Dutt is a seasoned business and HR professional with 4 decades of industry experience and 25 years as head of, and group head of HR across leading Indian corporates and multinational organizations. Widely recognized as a trusted partner, he has collaborated with global consulting firms on organizational transformation and leadership development. And together, they will explore how leadership rooted in empathy and values can shape the future of the work and future of the world. Please welcome Ramaprasad Banerjee in conversation with S.K. Dutt on Mother Leadership for the future of the world.
Hello. I am audible, right? Thank you, thank you. Good morning, and thank you for being here this morning. I have the very onerous and at the same time honorable and pleasurable task of holding a conversation with our own Dr. R.P. Banerjee on a very interesting topic, which is mother leadership. This book was first released, conceptualized and released in 1994, that's right. And once again, it is due for, the latest version is due for release in the next few months. Therefore, this conversation today is going to be that much more relevant. Just to sort of set a bit of context, when we speak in the context of leadership, sometimes it can appear to us to be a little abstract, up there kind of thing. And there is a lot of discussion which happens, and rightly so, on a topic which actually has relevance and impact on our day-to-day lives. Very interestingly, just to bring the realm of, reality into this topic, the impact, the consequences of leadership, the choices that we make, today's one of the leading newspapers give the reason of the recent indigo disruption, if I may say so, Two, one of the leading causes being culture and leadership style, very interestingly, and they make quite a bit of a detailed analysis. And one of the reasons which they mention is the centralization of leadership in terms of authority, etc., and the culture, including, various initiatives that the HR took, and not just the change in the DGCA leadership. The only point which I'm making without, doing a critique of this particular factor is that leadership has very practical, tangible consequences on the ground, and the choices and the choices that the leaders make. The last example is, today when we look at Donald Trump, our own Modi ji, then Mr. Putin, right? And once again, this is not a critique, but just to talk about their leadership styles. They have very different leadership styles, and the consequences and impact are felt every day. In fact, there is a lot of discussion happening, with the leadership style of recent changes over the last 1 year that have happened. As also, now, if we speak with Mr. Putin, his context, his purpose would be actually very, very different from the way and the lens through which the others are seeing, and vice versa, right? So essentially, when we speak in the context of purpose, values, ethics, etc. of leaders, they all come from a certain belief, a certain philosophy, the values, the ethics, etc., which shape the decisions that they make and the actions that they take. And in that context, the principles that Dr. Banerjee espouses in his Mother Leadership book, as also the very concept itself becomes that much more relevant in today's world, where it is, at the cost of repetition, there is so much strife, there is so much chaos, and there is so much of, sort of, at times, violence and so on and so forth, and the world is really crying out for peace. And when you speak in terms of peace, when you speak in terms of, a calmer world kind of thing, nothing more than a mother and the concept of a mother resonates, right? In that context, sir, I would like to, and especially when we go back, we hear a lot about, the leadership styles mentioned by Daniel Goleman, resonant leadership, by Richard Boyce and all of that, servant leadership, etc., etc. But the moment the word mother is used, it actually, in a sense, does not need much of explaining in a way. So, but at the same time, if you can harmonize, what would be some of the core principles of mother leadership? And what made you think of this as early as 1994?
Thank you, Mr. And good morning, namaskar, namaste to everybody. Mother leadership, the word takes us to a very perennial and very dear word, mother. When I conduct meditation, some people who don't, find it an easy way to get into the mind concentration, I advise them, just think of your mother and take the image of your mother at the place of your third eye with your eyes closed. Try to imagine your mother. You will find your mind is coming cool and concentrated. I've been into the Vedic practice nearly 5 decades or little more than that. I was endowed with that from my grandfather, Phanindranath Bandyopadhyay. He was a scholar of Vedas. And he told me in the beginning that God in any form that you can think of, any and every form of God doesn't have any gender identity in real sense of the term. God in all forms, if you consider God in form, God in all forms is like a mother. When you visit a Shiva temple, you can again address Shiva as mother. When you visit a place like Kanyakumari, where Swami Vivekananda, had advised the meditation place where Om was mentioned, transcendental form, formless identity or the conscious identity of divine. There also, you have a image of a mother. Mother is actually transcendental and universal. In any culture and everywhere in the world, I've traveled so many places, nearly 30 places in the world, in 30 countries in the world. And in all academic and other practical contexts, the mother becomes common and the meaning, implications, connotations the same. But when I'm talking about this idea of mother, mother has a gender identity. Mother is a feminine face. But the mother that I have actually coined in my mother leadership book is a mother. It is not a gender-specific concept. Anyone and everyone has a motherhood within. Motherhood is principle. It's principle-centric. Actually, I'll tell you, probably you know about Greenleaf's Center for Leadership, Servant Leadership. I visited their place twice. The first time when I had visited, I found that no mentioning about the origin of the topic, meaning origin of the concept. Then I took it forward and I told them that you need to mention the origin of the concept. Swami Vivekananda, when he was delivering a series of talks on Karma Yoga in United States and came to California with in that series. And after the talk in one day, he was asked by some people in the audience after the talk that, do you consider yourself as a leader? Swamiji gave an answer, wonderful answer that struck me at the early age. He said, Dasasya dasaho aham. I'm the servant of the servants. That is the coining word for servant leadership. Mother is a servant. Mother is a sister. Mother is a child. Mother is a personality having contained the fatherhood within. Mother is universal. And through mother, you can have the intrinsic domains of personalities. Like if you want good things, a mother knows how to take care. And probably the mother knows best how to take care, caring. The world needs compassion. Mother is compassionate. You have asked me a direct question, when did the idea come? One is this sensitization on a conceptual, intellectual plane by, from the Greenleaf Center. The other one, I just share it to a personal incident in Kolkata. I'm not mentioning the name of the, entity. I was entering into a big brand to buy a, trouser of mine and a complete set. When I was actually entering, just I overheard in the morning, just the showroom has opened just that time. I was in a hurry. I found that the person, the manager, probably the manager, he was scolding the security person in such a bad language. I felt so bad. Then I thought that, can this be a scenario of a, work condition or work situation? Everybody has got a dignity. How can I offer the dignity being, head of the function? So then I thought that in a family, a mother beats a child if at all that case arises, but she bleeds within. Can there be any kind of personality in organization? I thought, yes, if mother is there, then organizations can have a transformation. That was the seeding behind.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. We get the context in which, the idea as also the thought occurred to you. There is a school of thought which perhaps is in majority, I would feel so, which says that, which would agree almost blindly to the concept of, as you have described it, mother leadership, and the principles that it involves. But when we put that in the context of business, there is always this nagging doubt as to whether, let's say, for example, empathy. So we all agree, and we have seen this through our experience in the industry and otherwise, that people are all well-meaning by themselves, right? But when situations arise like that, sometimes even if you want to, it may be difficult for you to really practice this, you know, like, I mean, let's say empathy. I think the fundamental, and I'm sort of daring to say this, and we will all agree, when we say mother leadership, the most basic would be unconditional love. And this word, unconditional, I think is the most powerful of all, that no matter what, right? Now, I will just sort of draw a bit of parallel before I request you to kindly sort of, you know, explain this from your perspective. Even a Simon Sinek, and you rightly use the word family as well, he said that, you know, in business context, and he is a strong votary and his thoughts resonate with yours as well in a large part. But he also says that instead of saying we are a family, which we often say in organizations, let's say we are a community, because there would be times when we will not behave with you as we would have behaved in a family. Like with my own son, daughter, my mother, things like that, right? So very simply put, in this context, maybe we are not ready now, we are going to get ready, but we must make a beginning or otherwise. How practical is this idea to be implemented in real-time, hardcore business world?
Thank you. I share with you another incident. Sometime back, you know, for a public sector organization, I had introduced early morning prayer and, you know, the revealed consciousness in the morning, first 10 minutes. And of course, that did not last long. It was the head of the, you know, entity that place. After he was transferred to another region, this was discontinued. But it continued for nearly 7 months. There were significant changes in that. It was a collective consciousness, developing a collective consciousness for the organization. I told them, like, you know, in a family, in our, you know, even medieval families, if you look at R.C. Majumdar's description of the medieval families in India, you'll find families were having two different, I'm not getting into the detailed discussion of that. They had two different entities. One is the intrinsic entity of the family, the other one is extrinsic. Intrinsic head of the family is the mother. Extrinsic head of the family is the father. But the father, when he comes out of the intrinsic, the father actually carries forward the message of the intrinsic. So overall, if you look at the entire scenario, you'll find the overall, the control is in a consciousness, and that's the intrinsic consciousness. So it was valid for thousands of years. Entire Vedic civilization, which lasted not less than 10,000 years. Some of the British scholars have put it differently. I have contradicted them very strongly with all documents in my Vedic economy, in my corporate, you know, management through Vedic way, in my other works on the Vedas and Vedas for the world. I have given the profuse, you know, references for that. Until today, there is no, you know, contradiction on that. If anybody is there to contradict, I'm ready to, you know, answer the person. So the point is, in that Vedic period, which lasted for almost 10,000 years, and the entire period was a consciousness-driven period. A family was controlled, run by the spirit of divinity. Divine is at the center, and divine at the center is communicated and reflected through the motherhood. What I'm saying is, corporates should create a culture of character. The corporates, when it is able to create a culture of character, then we become council of equals. In my art and science of management, I have given a detailed analysis of case study of Ramakrishna Mission, ISKCON on one side, Procter & Gamble, and IBM on the other side. Categorical terms I have explained how they could survive, what are the different phases of survival, and wherever the challenges, how could they win over the challenges. This I have discussed in anthropomorphology of management. This is the first time this concept has been brought into management. Even Peter Drucker was thinking about it. In the last discussion of Peter Drucker, Tom Peters, and Bill Gates, when Drucker was ill and the other two persons came to Drucker to have a meet with him, meaning the ailing person, That was his last message for the, human community. So even in that, he had talked about the giving principle, the conscious principle. So when we have a centric around the giving and conscious principle, it is the divinity within. And the divinity within can be described, explained, applied in a visible physical form, and no better, identity can be available in human world, apart from motherhood. That's why I have coined the motherhood. You will get everything. Or the baby comes on earth through mother, immediately the mother calculates for a long term, my baby is going to become this, that. It's a long-term aspirational model. And when the mother comes to the markets get a transformation. You will understand, now there are a lot of studies. I can refer you to, I'm not mentioning the organizations. I can refer you to many studies during 24, 25, wherein it said the advent of ladies in the marketplace has actually transformed the market in terms of price sensitivity, the quality specifications, and the modern things of that, that has actually transformed the world. And when the spirit of mother comes in real terms in the market and in the organizations, you will find transformation is occurring there. Now the technology, when it is there, AI, advanced AI, all the agentic forms of that, and even if the wish technology takes place, there you need to come back to the intrinsics of the individual, and motherhood would be the best platform or best way out for that. That's my thought.
Thank you so much. Couldn't have agreed more. Absolutely. There is one wonderful thing which you mentioned, and it sort of also rang a bell, which is character. And whether it is institutions or organizations as a whole, or individuals, and of course it is individuals who make the organization, the people in organizations, right? Character is so very important, and you said that motherhood also is about, mother leadership is also about that. One aspect is, of course, organizations driving this in a way through policy and processes. For example, there would be organizations in this world who would say, as a policy, that if I have to enter a country for business, I will do anything, but I will not make any under-the-table payments. Very simple, right? We do it completely above board, and there is nothing like that, and that is communicated to everybody, kind of, right? So that also, inter alia, amounts to character and what the organization will accept and not accept, kind of thing. But do you have anything in mind in terms of what can organizations do more? There are so many initiatives they take through, learning and development, because there's a bit of a dichotomy. Character gets formed over the years, early childhood, and all of that, And unless it is a life-changing experience, the personality remains somewhat the same, right? So, other than policy and processes, especially from the lens of mother leadership, is there something more than character, organizations can do in terms of reinforcing or, linked with culture, where they can do something about character?
Thank you, sir, for this issue having raised by you. May I take cues from your previous points mentioned?
Please.
You mentioned about 3 names. You have taken 3 names of leaders. You have taken the name of Donald Trump, Narendra Modi, and Putin. I'm not taking their names, but I'm using this as having mentioned by you. See, when the nation is the largest organization, if you talk about organizations of different varieties, I call the nation as the largest because the World Council is yet to be formed. I'm trying to develop Asian integrity through Borderless Asia movement, which I have initiated 2016. Probably you have heard of.
Yes, sir.
And this year, Borderless Asia movement in Vietnam had a remarkable success, having participated, meaning having participation from 19 countries, and it's going to be a sure success, better than the European Union. I'm very sure about it. The future of the world should be the future of unification. As of now, I'm considering the nations remain. If the nations remain, a nation is the largest organization. For a nation, what could be the model? A nation's model should be something which was prescribed by Kautilya long back, almost 3,000 years in the back if you talk about. That's the timing given by British scholars but I have estimated the timing, which is even close to 500 years, even farther back. Now, Kautilya, is mentioned that a king is an ideal one who is an achiever of the Brahmagyan, meaning the supreme knowledge of Brahman within. What is that? Ataho vai imani bhutani jayanti yenu jatani jivanti yad brahma pravishanti tad brahma. Yat prana pravishanti tad brahma, yat manaha pravishanti tad brahma. So, there are so many different aspects of the collectiveness. A nation's homogeneity and collectiveness can be, developed by a personality where the commonness or universality of everyone is recognized in the true sense of the term. And that's possible only when you have got the concept of divinity and you are immersed in the divinity, which is our Vedic principle. Purnamadaha, Purnamidam, Purnyad, Purnam, Udachyate, Purnasyaha, Purnam Adaya, Purnam Eva Va Avasishvate. This is the concept of wholeness, wholesome, meaning the Supreme is whole. We are all fragments of that Supreme, even Supreme reflects through us. When this is a concept realized, Kautilya says, you want to rule the country, you should be a personality who is an impersonal one. The moment you become a person, you have got addictions, you have got desires, you have got, other attractions than the wholesome. So when you are into the wholesome, then you are an impersonal. If you can become an impersonal, a mother is a truly impersonal being. A mother will not attempt to hurt any child, any offspring in any way, even if she is hurt squarely by the other side. Mother has got tolerance, mother has got patience, infinite. And the leader should be having a personality who can absorb the evils and ills and can offer the beautiful things and goodness. I call it the mother is a flower. A flower doesn't absorb the fragrance of its, and a flower doesn't make the beauty of it, but it gives. This is a giving principle. Mother has a giving principle. A leader should be such that. Thank you. I'm sorry for having extended.
No. It's fine. How are we doing on time? I'm sorry I missed track. We have 5 minutes? Okay, awesome. Thank you. Thanks.
Oh, actually, it's a signal for 5 minutes.
Thanks. Sir, one last, query from my side on your book. You have authored so many books, and that include leadership the Vedic way, Vedic economy, ethics in business and management, which also extensively, deals with the Vedic this thing. So, if you could, for the benefit of the audience, tell us the inspiration that you derive from the Vedas, and why is it the central theme in all your compositions?
I've been, a few days back, in November, I had a series of talks in USA and UK, and in 2-3 different places. I guess in one of the places in London, you were also in that, and that everywhere I've mentioned the future of the human civilization lies in the spirit of Vedas. Vedas is a non-religion. If somebody comes and claims that Vedas belongs to my religion, I would tell, your mother doesn't belong to your own lineage. She is the inspiration behind you to create a lineage for you, father. So Vedas is something which has got the universality for any culture which has emerged. This is my statement. Anybody can contradict me. If anyone is there in the world to contradict me, I will be very happy for that, to answer the person and to give my arguments to the person. Vedas is the source book of the human culture. The West civilization, the Vedic period has offered. Some of the British scholars have branded it as pushed it down to the, near to our period, which is the false and wrong thing. However, I'm not getting into that. Vedas is the main spirit of human civilization, and I guess it is going to be the destiny of human civilization. Technology emerges first and fastest. You have to come back to your intrinsics, you have to have your meditative form, you have to realize your own good self, you have to find out your Atman. Atmana radhinam vidhi shariram ratham evatuhu buddhi tu sarathi viddhi manaha pragraham evacha. This is the connection between, I just mentioned in a minute, the meaning of this. Consider your body as a chariot. This chariot is moving in the world. The Atman, the Supreme Self, is seated within this chariot. And this chariot is getting driven by your external senses, the mind. Now get back to your intrinsics. And if you can do that, you have the best drive of this chariot and best output given to the chariot. That's how the motherhood, spirit of the mother, in an individual, in a collective situation, in an organization, in a society, in a nation, and in the world, can give a new shape to the world, protect the world, take the world ahead of its own boundaries, and make a world better world. That's my view. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks. So just a sentence or two, you know. One is spirituality may sound a little out of context when we talk hardcore business today. But people of my vintage have seen how even human resource management have transformed in terms of, you know, how the sensitivity, the importance of people, and initially it used to be fashionable to say people are our greatest assets, to now really grappling with how best can we do and create competitive advantage is something which is there, right? So similarly, and I'm sort of, you know, without getting away from the topic, meditation is something which was unthinkable at one point in time, that it will be so popular. But some of my friends from the Western world say that it is perhaps practiced more in the Western world than in India, even as we speak today, right? So when we speak spirituality, the essence of mother leadership, you know, the universality of mankind, as much as we think it is a little out of context today in business, I think that is where the world is moving. And as long as we make a beginning through excellent initiatives like Dr. Banerjee's book on, mother leadership, I think that's where the world can be, and it can be a better place. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Professor Banerjee, S.K. Dutt, for your words of wisdom. May I now please call our Head of English Cluster TV9 Network, Rakesh Khar, to kindly felicitate the two gentlemen. Thank you very much, all of you. We now move on to our next author session, which is India's past, present, and future. Gurcharan Das, Biju Paul Abraham in conversation with Amrish Das Gupta. Now, for our next author session, it is my pleasure to invite Gurcharan Das. He's a renowned Indian author, a public intellectual, widely respected for his writing on India's economy, its ethics, and its civilization. Before turning to writing full-time, he had the distinguished corporate career as the CEO of Procter & Gamble India, and later as the managing director of Procter & Gamble Worldwide. He's also the author of seminal works such as India Unbound, The Difficulty of Being Good, and Kama, The Riddle of Desire, where economics, ethics, and civilizations intersect. Joining him will be Biju Paul Abraham, Professor in Public Policy and Management Group at IIM Calcutta. A former Dean academic at IIM Calcutta, his work spans global political economy, governance, and public policy. He's the author of BRICS, The Quest for Inclusive Growth, The Intelligent Person's Guide to Good Governance, and Good Governance, Democratic Societies, as well as Globalization. He will be in conversation with Amrish Das Gupta. The session will reflect on India's journey, where we have come so far, where we stand today, and what are the choices that will define us.
Hello, 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 hello.
नजदीक
Hello. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I thought an intellectual discussion around business, economics, philosophy in the most argumentative part of the country and claim to be the most intellectual part of the country and will be having on the Sunday the hall filled up, but possibly our argumentative nature is declining, or maybe we are getting more certain about things and not very confused anymore, not so filled up today. This session, basically India in the past, present and tomorrow. I mean, of course, India has a philosophical history of many, many thousands years, 75 years of history of a modern constitution, and maybe 30 years of history and more to come in the future of a modern economy. So we have every components of that in our present economy, and we have two gentlemen with me, and of course it's a travesty, both through the audience appetite of listening to them and to their knowledge, that we are confining them within 45 minutes, because the audience possibly would love to hear each one of them for 45 hours, and that the knowledge that they have. Now I have with me Mr. Gurcharan Das. If you see Mr. Gurcharan Das or read his books, his main philosophy is society much above the state, morality, pluralism, not an institution controlling everything, and of course his own work on the trajectories of the Indian economy so shows what is to be learned from the past. And Professor Abraham is more on institution, more on process, lesser on speed, lesser on sloganing. So there could be a nuanced disagreement, but of course not any confrontation. And so it will be an interesting thing to see how they take it forward. The broad 4-5 areas I thought I will be requesting them to touch upon in sequence. One is of course the India's economic trajectory, where Mr. Das has a lot to say. The geopolitical order, disorder, and a country's strategic autonomy, with reference to India possibly, where Professor Abraham will have a lot to say. I am personally keen to know between them, because there is, as I mentioned, a nuanced disagreement on the institution, the democracy, and the pitfalls or the advantages of a democracy, of a state versus a society. And lastly, of course, the technology and morality. So these are the 4 or 5 things we will be touching upon. First, I will go to Mr. Das. His book, or volumes of books now going through the Indian economy's trajectory. Would like to hear from him briefly, that from the past to the present and to the future. Though we all know, I think it was Mark Twain who said that history always doesn't repeat itself, history rhymes. So how did you see the past rhyming in the present and in the future?
Thank you. This formidable set of books has been placed here because this is a set of books that I have edited for Penguin on India's business and economic history past, beginning with the Arthashastra and going through the Roman trade, period of the Roman trade with Tamilakam and so on. Why did I do it? I was concerned that we had today actually betrayed our past. Yes, giving lip service to the idea of Sone ki Chidiya, etc., without having a clue about what it meant. But the reality today is that what Mr. Trump called us the king of tariffs. And that's an insult. Tariffs are things that infant economies, that protection they build. 80 years later, To be called the king of tariffs is an insult. And I'm glad he's reminded us of this, and hopefully something is going to be done about that. But so, began with the idea of exploring the past, and fortunately I had some connection with Sanskrit past as well. And just as an example, the Arthashastra is a very simple definition of Raj Dharma is Shatabhaga. The king is told that you don't own the land, you have a share of the produce as long as you invest in what we today would call infrastructure. And he's told that your Shatabhaga means 1/6. That means 15%. So there is a just tax rate of 15%, the tax rate of Singapore. And somebody should have told this to Indira Gandhi when our tax rate went up to 97.5%. And so this is what I mean about the betrayal of the past, because we, after 1950, we closed our economy on the fear of the East India Company, and we still haven't got over that fear. And frankly, that explains today why we have less than 2% share of the global trade, manufactured product trade, and why we still have not created an industrial revolution. But let me take a minute to give you a sense of our past. There was a volcano that hit what is today the Deccan Plateau. That volcano led to lava covering 500,000 square miles. That lava over time hardened to create black rock. The black rock eroded and became black soil. And it was the genius of the Indian farmer who created from that black soil white gold. And what is white gold? Cotton. And therefore, throughout our history, India was identified with cotton. And in 78 AD, Pliny, the Roman senator, gets on the Senate stage and he tells the Romans, stop wearing those togas, stop your wives from cooking with Indian spices or wearing Indian perfumes. Rome is losing 65%, 2/3 of its bullion to India, or sell something to Indians. At that time, one ship was arriving at a South Indian port from Rome every day. But to jump, that trade surplus continued right through to the Industrial Revolution, right through. And in fact, habits in the world changed. Europeans discovered fine muslin, Dhaka muslin. And what was the result? They started wearing underwear. Because with their coarse cotton and wool, they couldn't wear underwear. And it started with the aristocracy, moved down to the middle classes in the 19th, 20th century. And wearing underwear is a mass habit today. And whether it's the Tata turban, which was called Hindavi, again from Indian cotton. My point is, there are lots of wonderful stories I can tell you. Today, I'll just tell you one last story. We have wonderful books on the Marwadis, the Sindhis, the Kachis, and the Parsis, and all these families as well. But the one story I want to tell you is from one of the volumes called The Mouse Merchant. It's a story of a startup. And since we are today in a world, the age of startups, I think it's appropriate, and I'll take 2 minutes. It's a boy who becomes 17 years old. His mother tells him, son, I've educated you now. His father died long ago. And she says, you're not going to do what I do. She cleans homes. She cleans homes for other people. And she says, over there lives the richest man in town. He's a kind man. Go and ask him for advice on what you should do. So the boy dutifully shows up at the great man's house. And while he's waiting for the man to come out, he sees a dead mouse in the courtyard. And he asks when the great man comes out, he asks him, what can I do for you? And the boy says, can I have the dead mouse? And the man laughs and he says, you're doing me a favor? Of course, but people come to me for loans, for a job. Can I help you? The boy says, no, that's fine. And he takes the dead mouse. He knows a widow who lives in the neighborhood. She has a cat. He sells the dead mouse as cat food to the widow, and the few paisa she gives him, he goes to the bazaar, he buys chana chor garam. He makes little packets of that, and with a jug of water, a ghada of pani, he goes into the town square and he waits. And in the afternoon, he knows loggers come from the forest, bearing logs of wood on their heads. They put their logs down to rest in the afternoon, and he offers each one water and a snack. And since nobody has ever done this to them before, and they have no money, they each give him a log of wood. And he repeats this over 3 months. Each sells a log, buys more, snack, etc. But then the monsoon comes. The logging in the forest stops. The price in the timber market starts climbing. He has a house full of logs at the time, and he starts unloading his logs. And by the end of the season, he has made enough money to buy a shop in the timber market. And he sets himself up as a timber merchant. And from the next season, he has one competitive advantage. His suppliers know him. They love him. And they bring their best supply to him first. Anyway, he prospers as a timber merchant. But after a couple of years, he says that there's greater margin to be made in actually converting that wood, and since they live near a shipyard, into ships. And so he finds a retired master carpenter, shipbuilder, makes him his partner, and soon he's in the shipbuilding. He has a subsidiary, shipbuilding business. After a couple of more years, he finds actually there's even higher margin in shipping passengers and cargo, and so he finds a retired captain and makes him, and I'm just finishing the story. My point is that also succeeds, and by 25, he has become the richest man in town, and he goes to a jeweler and asks him to make him a gold mouse. And he takes that gold mouse to that rich man where he got the dead mouse from, and he presents the gold mouse to him, and he says, in today's language, this is your return on venture capital investment, which you made with the dead mouse. And the man hears this story, and he's so happy, he gives his daughter in marriage to this boy, and they live happily ever after. Now, that's the story of a startup.
Very nice.
So what I'm trying to say is that for the first 40 years after independence, we could not have had a startup during License Raj. There was no possibility. And there were no startups. And so We have learned the long lessons from our history. I could keep entertaining you with lots of stories, but thank you for your patience.
I know, and that's why I said that even sitting with you for 45 hours may not be doing a justice to the stories which you have. But I take a point in which you have all throughout in your books also, you have maintained that the liberation of the individual energy or the creativity or the societal energy, rather than having a lot of institutional gripping, or the thing is actually prospers the economy much more, as an example that you gave right now through that boy. But coming to Biju, you, I mean, there are two aspects of your writings, which of course is very relevant and topical today. One is the institutional, creation of an institution, more systems, more processes, more discipline. And the other one is the geopolitical part of yours. Now, while you speak on your thoughts, but one specific question I have is that how do we marry the two? Because the geopolitical today is going through so much of disorders that institutionalizing, systemizing a geopolitical strategy, it sometimes could be very compromising because we have to be very quick, agile. Also, there could be certain times of thing in terms of a policy formulation, some compromisation or ambiguity to the ethics part of it, because it's a policy that needs to be created. It could be many times quite ambiguous and to be changed. So how do you bring a compromisation between the two, institution and geopolitics?
Yeah, thank you, Ambarish, for that question. First of all, let me say that I completely agree with Mr. Das, and I remember his visit to IMC almost 2 decades ago to promote his first book, when he made very much the same point about the economy being closed and that creating problems as far as growth was concerned. Of course, after liberalization, you did create conditions under which firms could invest. A startup ecosystem, of course, has been developed in recent years and so on. And even though our share in terms of world trade is low, it certainly has increased over a period of time. So particularly in terms of services, for example, the kind of integration that we had with the rest of the world has been quite significant. And government, I think, on the whole has played a very good role in terms of ensuring that there is very light regulation, especially in services. And that is what has helped us to integrate much more with the rest of the world. Manufacturing has not been so much of a success story, despite a lot of government incentives. I mean, we can go into the reasons as to why that has happened. I will not go into that now. But even though the domestic environment, I think, certainly has improved compared to what it was pre-liberalization, I think the great challenge that we face now is that the international environment has certainly turned significantly negative. And I think that is what is more concerning as far as we are concerned. Of course, there are startups that have started, there is economic growth that is happening, but if you look at attempts to integrate India with the rest of the world in terms of increasing our exports, there certainly the current geopolitical environment is turning. Certainly, I won't say hostile, but it's certainly not as good as what it used to be. And that, I think, is where the major challenges remain. I foresee 2 major issues. One, of course, is that countries are becoming much more closed. I mean, we've all been arguing that economies should become much more open, but because of the growing nationalist sentiment, what we are seeing is countries are becoming more and more inward-looking. They are raising tariffs, they are raising restrictions on investment and so on, so that is concerning. The second problem, I think, is that when it comes to leverage in terms of negotiating with other countries and getting them to reduce their tariffs, that leverage that we seem to have is actually quite limited. So just to give a comparison with China, for example, one of the things the Chinese have used very effectively in order to get the US to hold off on some of the tariff increases that they had, it was the fact that they had a control of critical minerals. And of course, this is something that they've been doing over decades. And because of that, they had that leverage which enabled them to get a better environment as far as tariffs was concerned. Whereas when we look at the situation that we face now, we are finding it extremely difficult to actually get a trade deal because of the fact that we don't have that leverage over other countries, particularly over the US. but also the fact that if you are really to get significant trade advantages, then it really means opening up our market in areas where there are significant concerns with regard to opening up, like agriculture, that is one. Or the other is promising huge investments, particularly in the case of the US. For example, the South Koreans and the Japanese have promised huge investments as far as the US economy is concerned in order to get their tariffs. That ability to sort of make those investments are also not there as far as we are concerned, or as far as our firms are concerned. So that is, to me, is what is concerning. The domestic environment has certainly improved for investment, but the international environment has turned negative. But we seem to have very little leverage in terms of ensuring that our interests are taken care of when other countries also set their tariffs. That, to me, is a bit concerning at the moment.
Got your point. I'll come to Mr. Dash very soon with another subject of yours. But staying on the point which you made, just give me a very quick answer to that. Sometimes the international policy which we create, does that hinge upon our electoral policy also, which means to become popular to my electorates? I create an international policy which may always not be very positive, which may be sometimes detrimental for our economy. As an example, posturing animosity with a country could make me popular in the country, but it could be economically detrimental. So do you think our electoral policies to become popular internally in the country also to a large extent determines our international policies?
I wouldn't say it's a desire to become electorally popular which creates issues, but it's more the realization within the government that there are certain aspects of policy which are non-negotiable, which is where I mentioned about agriculture as an area. So for example, the US has been very insistent that we open up our agricultural sector, but there are very, very good reasons why the government is extremely reluctant to open up that sector. Again, Mr. Das mentioned that there were certain reasons why countries have imposed tariffs, and we need to recognize that. So I don't think it is a question of the government saying we will not open up certain sectors in order to become popular, but it is because the government realizes that opening up would have significant negative economic implications for significant sections of our society that they don't open up. And that is certainly something that you cannot question, because those interests have to be protected, whatever may happen in the rest of the world.
Got it. You wanted to make a point on this.
Well, I think that this, look at the positive side of yes, you've laid out the negative side of the world moving away from globalization, away from WTO, etc. But frankly, I would say that we are still the most over-regulated economy in the world. In fact, just before this session started, we were discussing with AKB here that actually the winds of deregulation are finally beginning to blow in Delhi. And this is if this can continue, and this has been forced on India, because of this situation. Similarly, I would say even agriculture. The genetically modified foods, I'm sure it's a bad word in Calcutta, but the fact is that 74 countries consume GM foods, and they're in perfectly good health. In fact, Indians go to America and they don't die when they go to the US. And my point is that if the GM revolution, the scientific revolution passed us by, let's not allow the gene editing revolution, which is there today. And Indian scientists have done studies that should force us to go back to science. After all, the dwarf variety that created the green revolution was a scientific move. So what I'm trying to say is there are a lot of things that we can also do for our farmers. Now, the farm laws were partly meant for that, but look at the side, look at it as a stimulus. Look at the present situation as a stimulus. There's still a lot. I mean, no country has for the last 3 years has been growing like India has grown. No major country. And so this is the time to, and you're right. I mean, it's hard. The fact is we are a democracy, but this is where we have to learn. For example, doing reforms in a democracy are difficult. But Margaret Thatcher used to say, I spend 20% of my time reforming and 80% selling the reforms. No Indian leader has sold the reforms. In fact, once, Mr. Modi had a meeting of a few people who write on economics, and he had Nayanan, Swaminathan, Iyer, and I was there, and he asked each of us, what should he be doing? This is soon after, 2016, I think it was. And I said, sell the market. And you know what he said? Give me a one-pager. That's the word he used, to sell the market. I gave it to him. He used it on Sunday for a Ban Ki Baat, and then he stopped. You have to do it every day. Even Deng Xiaoping was in the China. He didn't have to sell the market to anybody, but he was selling it all the time. And it is to our bureaucracy that we have to sell the reform. And that today, the bureaucracy still remains the major obstacle to India's future.
Yeah, I know you have been very much a champion and a protagonist of free thoughts, more Ashoka than Arthashastra. You have been always very much a champion of moral pluralism and all those things. But tell me one thing, when you were championing a little bit of deregulation, when you were trying to bring down institutions more for a societal upliftment to happen, in a country of around 150 crores where we have huge amount of lack of education, where we have huge amount of lack of exposure, the chances of exploiting the liberation or an institutional deregulation to a negative way is much more. In such a country, would you still be advocating the regulation should be minimized, or once when you reach that level of an education, then only it should be done?
Well, I mean, the regulation, the first principle of regulation is the principle of lightness. The regulation should be there to catch one crook and not to hurt 99% of the innocent. Unfortunately, that often happens. And that's why I was saying it's such good news that we have finally got that. And they are making some sensible moves today.
It's a regulated time buzzer. Yeah. Staying with you on your other topic of morality, you have written quite a lot and very interestingly on the morality. And even I have been discussing a couple of days back also, going back into the history of Hegel at that time, the creation of a moral corporation so that morality is not imposed, it is inbuilt in a corporation or in a society. Pluralism also, these are some of the things that should be coming up. Does it have anything to do with religion, or morality has nothing to do with religion?
No, morality preceded religion. Both Indian texts say that, and so did Plato say that. And the instinct of the moral is set in quite very early in time. There was a wonderful experiment that Piaget, the psychologist, did with 3-year-olds. He took a cake at a birthday party of 3-year-olds, and he cut an exact same slice for all the 8 children who were at the birthday party. But he made one double the size and randomly gave it to one kid. And the children got angry. Some started crying. At the age of 3, they had understood the notion of fairness. Fairness is a very central idea in in morality. And so in India, actually the Dharma Shastras make it, we have a textbook written by an American author on the Dharma of business. And it's really he uses the Dharma Shastras. He has interrogated the Dharma Shastras and the commentaries, medieval commentaries. And the basic principle of the difference between labh and lobh. Labh is profit and lobh is greed. And lobh is wrong and labh is okay. Somebody should have told this to Mr. Nehru when he told Mr. Tata that profit's a dirty word. And let's not talk about it before lunch. And then he moved on to show him his pandas that he got from China. And so, you know, it's in our own society. It's not imposed through Hegel or Kant or any of the philosophers. But it's a very central dharma. The king in the Arthashastra, the king is told that dharma precedes you and you have a right to uphold dharma for the benefit of the people. And well, enough said.
Thank you. And last question, since we already have the buzzer warning us. For you, Biju, from an international perspective, international law, trade perspective, and taking a cue from what Mr. Das said, does morality play any role in forging out international policy and international rules, regulations, trade policies and everything?
Yeah, well, it is supposed to. So if you look at the World Trade Organization agreements, WTO agreements, multilateral trade agreements, it is essentially built on the concept of treating all nations as equal. But in reality, in terms of how it's implemented, very often, you know, it is not implemented in that manner, and I think that is one of the major problems. So for example, if you look at international trade, one of the great concerns is that international institutions are no longer relevant as far as trade policy is concerned. The WTO has almost become irrelevant. But relating it to the point that Mr. Das was making about fairness, I think that is what is critical, whether it is international regulation or domestic regulation. So he made the point about, you know, too much regulation. I mean, there are certain areas where certainly you need a lot of regulation. Health and safety, for example, is one. But I think what is important in order to increase investment is the belief that regulation is fair. That if I follow the regulations, I will be treated just as equally as the next person. I think the problem that's happening when it comes to enforcement of regulation, and this is where I think the problem of investment in India is coming from, regulation is seen as not being fair. Whether it's heavy or not heavy is not the issue. Is it being seen as fair? And the moment it is not seen as fair, then of course investment suffers very significantly. And that's the big problem that we are facing at the moment.
Don't give me a diplomatic answer, give me an answer straight. If we see in the world a country engaging in a kind of genocide, should we still do business with them or not do business with them? Morality or economy?
Okay, yeah, this is a tough question.
Okay.
It's like the old question of, you know, the old answer that, you know, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter kind of thing. I mean, there are, you know, there's genocide and there is genocide. Some we turn a blind eye to because, you know, that is what real politics is all about. But should we do it? Perhaps we should not, but we need to deal with the world as it is, not as we would like it to be. That's the big problem.
Thank you, gentlemen. So what it comes out at the end from both your extremely erudite treatment of this subject is that balancing is the most critical thing. There will be ambiguity, there will be morality, there will be economic challenge, there will be economic prosperity, but amongst all these things, we have to always create a strategy of proper balancing. Thank you very much, and really, really
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Let's give it up for Gurcharan Das, Biju Paul Ibrahim, and Ambrish Das Gupta to felicitate our guests. May I please invite Sudha Sadanand, Consulting Editor, TV9 Network, on stage. Thank you, everybody. For our next author session, which is Enduring Enterprises in a Volatile World, may I please call R. Gopalakrishnan. He's a distinguished business leader. He's an author and has held various leadership roles, including Executive Director at Tata Sons and Vice Chairman of Hindustan Unilever. He's known for translating boardroom wisdom into timeless leadership lessons. He's the author of The Case of the Bonsai Manager, Doodles on Leadership, and What the CEO Really Wants. He will be in conversation with Rakesh Khar and myself. This is a bit of a last-minute conversation.
Hello.
Since our moderator, Rudra Chatterjee, could not make it, so Rakesh Khar and I are replacing him, and I hope we do a fair enough job. So there's a lot of pressure on us, but let me kick off this conversation with a fundamental question that everybody wants to know, at least a startup founder out there wants to know. You have seen it all in your decades in leadership. You have seen liberalization, you've seen globalization, you've seen pandemic, and you've seen the advent of AI. What, in your assessment, differentiates a long-lasting enterprise that can bear these challenges from an organization that tumbles within years?
I think there are three factors. Firstly, I'm a great advocate. I'm glad to see, actually, I'm not worried that there's not a big crowd, but there are a lot of young people here. And frankly, if you ask me, I've traveled all the way to talk to the young people.
Oh, brilliant.
This is your time, young people.
Yeah.
See, the oldies can keep talking to each other. And that is happening. But the people who should be listening are the young people. And I have a message for the young people in answering your question. I'm a great believer that an economy needs long-lasting enterprises. I got interested in the subject of long-lasting enterprises, Dirgha Ayush, because I found a lot of Alpa Ayush companies coming up and young people getting excited by organizations that are being set up to die like moths around the light. I'm not criticizing all of them because short life is not wasted. Swami Vivekananda died at 32. So did Srinivas Ramanujam. But we need the Einsteins and the Rabindranaths also who live a long life. And an economy is built on people with long life. And so the question of what makes, I have lucky or unlucky, depending on how you look at it, that I've worked for two long life organizations. One is Hindustan Lever and one is Tata's. Out of the locally set up companies, probably Tata is amongst the oldest. I will hesitate to say it is the oldest. And I have studied what it is that it takes to make a long-lasting organization. I've written some books also on the subject. But your question was, what are the 2 or 3 things that distinguish them? The first thing is they care about people. I went to 6 companies. I wrote to 10 CEOs saying, I'm doing this research with a management institute. Would you cooperate? And I chose companies which came up after I began my career. I didn't choose Tata for obvious reasons. I didn't choose Godrej. I didn't choose Birla. I chose companies that came up. When I started my career, these companies didn't exist. So I went to Marico. I went to Biocon, and so on and so forth. I went to TCS, which didn't exist when I began my career. 6 of them agreed to participate. And the 3 things that we found, common amongst all the 6. Number 1, they cared for people. Now that has multiple dimensions. You can write a book on that itself. People includes employees, vendors, what I think Mr. Dr. R.P. Banerjee was saying this morning about mother
That's right.
intuition, it resonated with me because that's what I found out of my research. They cared for people. And the marker that I found most stunning, even for a guy who's been around for a long time and can be cynical, is 6 CEOs whom I interviewed said they spend between 20 to 35% of their time on people matters. 20 to 35. Not on AI, not on long-term strategy, but on people matters. The details are in the books and I won't go into that. The second thing they stated was they are having to learn and relearn constantly how to do balancing short-term and long-term, because you have to do both. You can't do one or the other. This again resonated with the mother aspect that spoke about this morning by Dr. Banerjee. Mothers are the most remarkable example of balancing. They don't balance, they do both. They expand their time. Because I've never seen a mother, I've got my daughters-in-law, they're managing both. They look hassled with the short term, because the child is scrapping, doing all the things that children are supposed to do. But they're also dreaming. Will she become an artist? She drew this line. Will she become a writer because she wrote this essay in school? So balancing short and long term simultaneously. That's the second aspect. The third is what we call critical thinking. Now, if you go to educationists, they all have different definitions of critical thinking. My definition of critical thinking is, can you see unobvious alternatives? Can you be a geologist and an astronomer at the same time? So what does that mean? Imagine that you have sent an astronomer and a geologist to the moon or to Mars, and you told them, take in your backpack all the instruments that you require. As soon as they land, the geologist will step out of the spacecraft. What will he or she do? Kurpi nikalega, start digging. Because the question that is driving a geologist, or even often a physicist, is what is inside this? The astronomer will step out and look up and say, what is this all a part of? They are very different answers. And you need both the answers if you want to create a long-living institution. If you will allow me a practical example that I have seen during my stint in Tata's,
Sure.
to make this point about astronomy and geology. They are not just talking points or philosophical points. In the director's lunchroom one day, we were all very excited. TCS was having an IPO. This is back in 2003 or thereabouts. And the merchant bankers were telling us, you're going to get 800, next week was 850, 900, 950. And then one day they said you could get up to 1,000. And I was younger and less contemplative than, say, Ratan Tata, who was my boss at that time. And I said, boss, go for it. 1,000 kya, let's even try 1,050. He said, but have you thought about leaving something on the table for the retail investor? At what price would you have left something on the table for the retail investor? I said, yeah, what are you thinking about retail investor? I want all the bucks. American way of doing business, don't leave anything on the table. Finally, after a discussion, we priced it at 900, I think. And retail investors made money on that, even in the first year. Today, you buy it at 900, the retail investor finds it's at 600. And this is the difference. He was thinking of what is this a part of, and why will it last for a long time? Will people be happy and grateful to Tata or TCS in this case? And I was thinking of take all the cream, baad mein dekha jayega. So 3 things to summarize: people, critical thinking, long and short term. Sorry, long answer to a short question.
That's okay. Yesterday you were, very good with your one-liners. Today you were
Sorry?
yesterday you were very good with your one-liners. Today you are as good with your longer explanations. Very anecdotal. You talked about people as assets. Actually, yesterday Arun Mayer also talked about the incapability of Indian corporates to look at people as assets. They see them as depreciating assets rather than as appreciating assets. That's a new, idea that I came across yesterday. So people as assets, you're a great example yourself because you worked with companies which have endured. So you endure as a brand, as an individual, so do these companies. If you do a global, if I zoom out from the Indian context and you do a global review, we have seen that there's a decadal shift in companies, there's a decadal shift in companies. Am I audible? Just up the audio a bit at the PCR level. So, there's a decadal shift when we look at companies. From energy sector, we moved to technology, and in technology domain, we have moved from pure play, real estate companies and technology domain to AI. And now look at AI also, we are ending the year with the possibility of an AI bubble. So there's uncertainty. And in the domestic context, I gave you the global context. In the domestic context, we got so excited about the startup dream. And, numbers might vary, but we're looking at a 50% wastage or 50% death rate. So in that sense, we are already living in a very, very uncertain VUCA world where only certainty is uncertainty. So what is the trajectory for global companies and Indian companies in terms of trying to aspire for a larger and enduring entity?
I'm not one of those who believes that you must have a universal number, irrespective of which industry you're operating in. If you're a media company, you'll have 90% attrition or 80%, very, very high.
You're just about there.
About there.
No, I wish there were more players, so there would be greater attrition.
But I think if you look at nature, every species has its own attrition rate. Fruit flies last one day. They are not useless. They have great uses in science, in laboratory work. Tortoises, I once went to the Calcutta Zoo and found a tortoise which was reported at that time to be living at the time of Sirajuddaula. I considered it a venerable tortoise. Ki bhai, tumne Sirajuddaula ko dekha hai. Tell me what happened. So there are multiple species. In the same way, there are multiple companies. Think of each company as one of the genetic mutations that nature has created. What I think is important is that within that species, you should have a lower attrition rate of the physical and the productive. I'm not talking of attrition rate by keeping old fruit flies on forever and ever. In fact, I was telling AKB this morning that the Indian economy is growing, but our total factor productivity, I think the young people here will understand what is TFP. If you don't, please ask your professor when you go back. Is not growing as much, under 1%. In China, grew at 3.5%. So that gives a kicker to the GDP growth. And in the same way, companies must be increasing total factor productivity, apart from investing in assets and so on. And people is the one that gives you the total factor productivity.
Since you talked about total factor productivity, organizations are also finding it very hard. And we had a conversation yesterday when you were sitting on stage with Barun, talking about the new generation of people, their work ethic being very different. And in that context, I also want to bring in what's happening as far as contemporary India is concerned. I hope I'm audible. So, a lot of factors that we talk about when we talk about present contemporary times. We're looking at technology shocks, geopolitical shocks. Every young person has woken up to Trump tariffs. We're looking at supply chain disruptions. In that context, are we overestimating the current turbulence as compared to the turbulence we have seen in yesteryears because there is a lack of context here? Or do you think these will be remarkable changes going forward?
I think we are terribly overestimating.
Okay.
Short answer.
Okay. Okay. So you believe that these will pass too?
Everything in the world will pass. This planet has existed for billions of years here, before you and I and economists came into existence. The point is this. Things are changing very rapidly, no argument. exponentially, no argument. But the tools with which you're coping with that change are also increasing exponentially. The gap is constant.
Okay.
It's the gap that matters. So, if my grandfather would wait at the bullock cart, to wait for his son to arrive from somewhere else in the bullock cart yard, he would wait maybe hours or days. Today, my son looks at internet and he keeps track of where the planes are flying. The tools have also changed. I think we're forgetting to emphasize the gap. And I believe that change has always been tectonic because the nature of change is something that you contextualize to now. I remember when I was a kid, growing up here in Calcutta, my grandfather was in the village in Tanjore. My dad used to take us periodically for visiting the grandparents. And he would tell me, this is my recollection, I was only 8 or 9 years of age. He said, you know, when I was your age, my father, so I'm now going to my great-grandfather, whom I've never met, took me from this place to that place because something called a railway engine was being commissioned. It is a big black monster which was putting out smoke. And they say it will go from here to Madras in 8 hours. I don't know how you people are going to live your life. Thank God I have finished my term. I'm saying the same thing to my grandson. Except I'm not talking of it.
So are you in a way saying that we make a big hullabaloo?
Absolutely.
Okay.
No, but
I think that's
right.
wise for a lot of young people out there.
I think I must tell young people, be strongly influenced and impacted by the change of technology, but don't listen to this excessive bullshit of saying, oh, the world has never changed, AI is going to take away all the jobs. This is the biggest load of rubbish.
So it's quite consoling, sir, that, if I may add,
Sorry?
that it's quite consoling that you're not, playing the doomsday. You're saying that things are...
Well, it depends on what age you are, you see.
No, I'm at the cusp,
Young people may say, this guy is going to be dead and gone, but he's telling us all the wrong things.
Yeah, no,
But I'm telling you, I have, and there are people of my sort of age group.
No, but on a serious note, sir, I think, it's important to also look at, while there is overestimation and media headlines, we scream headlines, that's one of our failings, also strengths probably. But the fact of the matter is that, the disruption that has happened at the start of the year with one individual, so to say, reimagining the entire global order, in my lifetime as a journalist for about 4 decades now, I haven't seen that kind of disruption. I'm not calling it good, bad, ugly. But fact of the matter is that the established global order, change is welcome and it leads to evolution and, in many cases. But here in this case, don't you think, the fear of established global norms being given a go by one individual is a real threat?
The global norm has been disturbed by one individual. That's your question?
I mean, we're talking about Trump and the way, and the global institutions.
It's not the first time in my lifetime it's happened. I was a young kid, except that at that time, when Hitler took over the world, what happened?
Yeah, so we have the comparison.
I'm not equating Hitler and Trump.
We have the comparison, that's
I
it.
want my US visa to be safe. But for God's sake...
Is it due for renewal?
Yeah. Let's not sort of overestimate these things.
Yeah,
when Alexander came and met Porus on the banks of the Indus River, was he not upturning the world? So, throughout history, you'll find that some bloke was there who was upturning the world. The question of whether it is A or B can be argued.
There's a connected question, sir. In this context, we said we live in a very uncertain world. And what is the role of governments, in pushing businesses? America has for long been known as pushing its businesses, something now India is doing little, reluctantly. And, the gentleman earlier on this seat talked about the bureaucracy being a problem. So should governments actually push businesses to make them more enduring, make them more profitable? There's a debate globally about the role of politics in building capital as an institution. In the Indian context, how we are placed today. There's a massive churn against capital. It's being viewed in a certain manner, which may not be always palatable to capital's growth. And wealth creators are also seen in a certain respect, while as we have the American example, we have the EU example, where they're pushing their businesses, openly advocating them as the solution, building their consumers, building their top line and bottom line.
You know, it's very easy to sit and pontificate on how government should respond and do things. I don't want to do that because it costs me nothing. If I was a secretary to a particular ministry, my answer would be different. But I want to take one example from our own history. When this country was becoming independent, and I was too young at that time to understand what's going on, but later on we've all done the reading, they said we need a constitution. And if you see what they did, they got the constitutions from all over the world, took the best they could. They appointed a father figure who was controversial in his own right to go through these along with a group of very erudite people. And they developed a constitution. But very, very important is they developed a preamble to the constitution. And for me, what this tells me, the preamble is philosophical. The constitution is putting out policy. And then comes the practice. The same constitution was implemented differently during the time of Nehru, Mrs. Gandhi, and now. Everybody swears by the same book, but they're doing different things to the media world. And since I'm sitting and talking to two media people, if I say Hiren Joshi to you, it means something. Not to these youngsters here, but to you it means something. Why? The young people who are interested to know the biography of Hiren Joshi can talk to.
Everybody's going to go home and Google Hiren Joshi now.
So I'm telling you.
And they may not be much available.
Whereas you look at industrial policy Resolution 1951, Industrial Policy 1956, and every 20 years, new secretaries come and put new rules, new bandhans. What I am advocating, taking a leaf from the Constitution, is it's time India needs a philosophy which defines what the government's role is. I'm fed up of governments trying to tell you what to do. You can't be daddy, mummy to your children till they are 80 years old. This is what our government does. They want to tell people who are 75 years old how to lead their lives. Let them alone. Create a philosophy which says we need enterprises that are long-lasting. We need enterprises that are, I'm giving you illustrations rather than telling you what it should contain. We need enterprises that do good to society. We don't have to be putting 2% CSR, let them do 10. You know, when CSR came in Tata's, we calculated, we were already doing 5%. We said, wow, there's a cost saving. We now have to give only 2%. This is that phase of controls and so on we have been through. There's no point debating and discussing it. But I think if we can develop an enterprise philosophy, which is I call the equivalent of the preamble to the Constitution, and enterprise, and I'm not saying industrial manufacturing, enterprise, includes trading, foreign exchange, foreign trade, all of these things. And then tell people, now the field is clear, run. Of course, regulate what you have to regulate. There are things that you have to regulate. So I'm writing a book on this, so my mind is really driven by saying, do we need to rethink fundamentally the way we deal with enterprise? Why is it that a country which has got all the stated potential that it has, with which I agree, by the way, human potential, should be stuck at 12 to 15% of industrial production contributing to GDP for the last 40 years? And every prime minister, industries minister will come and give the same speech, and the FICCI and the CIIs will sit and genuflect at the waist. The newspapers will write the same and carry on as usual. I think it's time to, I'd love to see a change. Okay. If possible, during my lifetime. I propose to live long enough to see it.
Okay. So you're essentially saying it's cyclical. All these disruptions come and go, and they prepare you. They make you more resilient.
No, his question was about industrial policy.
That's right. Industrial policy. You know, since we are in the last leg of our conversation, I have to ask you, as far as challenges is concerned, what, in your assessment, are the challenges to enduring, long-lasting enterprises? Are they going to be by the way of people, culture, or technology? What challenges do you foresee them facing? You said you're writing a book, you're dwelling on whether you need to rethink fundamentals. Where do the challenge lie?
I think the challenge lies, I will not go into details but business has been groomed and trained and educated. Children, listen, young people here, you're trained to make businesses efficient. But nobody trains you to make them effective. And efficiency and effectiveness are two different things. They are not the same. Effectiveness has the mother instinct. Efficiency has the do more out of less. And since we are at the end of our conversation, I want to give a metaphor because I'm really interested that all these below 30s are sitting here, below 25s are sitting here. You take music as a metaphor. You go and see a Western classical music philharmonic orchestra. Everybody will be sitting seriously and various 100 people will come and sit down. They'll have a score sheet. When the maestro comes, everybody will clap. And then magical music flows for the next so much time. You see outwardly discipline. But internally, you know that there has been great creativity. Creativity is encapsulated within discipline. You're telling me to shut up?
That's for us, not for you.
Not you, us.
No, I will shut up.
No,
I think that's fair enough.
Yeah.
But you look at an Indian classical music, there'll be hardly 5 guys there. They'll saunter onto the stage.
That's right.
They seem to talk to each other through their instruments. Most often they don't even have a score sheet. You see tremendous creativity and relationships, but there's great riyas behind it. What you see outwardly is creativity, inside you see discipline. So discipline is inside and creativity outside, or creativity outside, discipline inside. Makes a big difference. And this is the difference between effectiveness and efficiency.
One last question. I know we're running, short on time. India is witnessing a robust civil society. At least there's an attempt at that. And capital is being seen, deficient on the social contract. Do you think companies, there are few today, honorable ones like the one you mentioned and where you worked, largely the social contract is, a missing plank. That's how the society looks at capital. Do you think companies that need to endure longer, one of the key pieces to address and be consistent with that is social capital, social construct?
Listen, I'm saying companies that last long have no choice but to engage with the social construct. If you don't engage with the social construct, you won't last long. So the question is, do you want to live in Delhi and live till the age of 90 or not? It's okay, carry on. Oh, I thought she's coming to assault me.
No, I almost fell in love with you. I went weak in my knees.
Thank you.
Yes.
Sorry, I have slight vertigo
all right,
sometimes,
all right.
and my apologies,
You go
but
ahead.
I saw a handsome man and I just wanted to kind of buckle under that charm.
You could finish, sir. We
Yeah,
still have
yeah,
time.
Yeah.
Go ahead, sir.
I think
No, I think
hearing Sudha makes me say, please send this video clipping. I'll show it to my wife that somebody thinks I'm handsome.
So before I wind up, I eavesdropped on a morning breakfast conversation that our Gopalakrishnan and Gurcharan Das were having on what makes an enterprise long-lasting, and we were comparing it to Germany's Mittelstand companies, where there are companies which are as old as 300 years, 400 years. So in that context, for the young people, once again, I have to ask you, what differentiates between a company which is long-lasting versus companies, the startups essentially today, as you were referring to, with shorter vision, lot of capital, but undeniably, low on patience, cannot go beyond 10 years, don't have a long-term runway or a long-term horizon. What should they learn from these companies?
Well,
how can they have a long runway?
Your definition of startup itself, I disagree with.
Okay.
Nowhere is it written. No law of physics states that startups should be having a lot of capital, should be dying within 10 years. The fact that we are practicing that is a separate matter, and I think that's the subject of the next panel discussion.
It is, yes.
In my lifetime, these companies were started as startups. Biocon, Marico, They've lasted 50, 60 years, and from all I can see, they will last quite some time more. They didn't go and engage. They were disciplined about capital allocation, total factor productivity, all the mumbo jumbo that you're taught in your B school. So it is not a given. The fact that some guys are doing it and they are in a hurry is a matter of their personality and their approach to it.
But there are more of them in hurry today.
There
are more of them who are in hurry today.
No. If you give too much money to a family, at some stage the family from building businesses starts to denude. Gurcharan was giving us an example over breakfast. You're giving them lots of money with the caveat that I want the returns in 5 years. And I think the wrong incentives. Why should we Americanize everything? I don't understand. Wasn't Tata a startup in 1868? Wasn't Marico a startup in 1981? And people in those days when Marico went with the public, even Biocon, Kiran Mazumdar and I were playing golf, and she said,
these are great examples.
Be a friend, yaar, buy 50 shares. I said, theek hai yaar, dosti ke liye kar lenge. That's how Biocon began. So we forget all this. Now that they are multi-billion-dollar corporations, we think, and we think of the new startup. There are some startups. You know, India has 100 or 108, I've forgotten, what is it called? Unicorn. 3 of them make profit. Now maybe it's become 5. I don't know.
I mentioned 50% wastage in the overall startup ecosystem.
30%?
50% wastage in the overall startup ecosystem.
I think we need startups. Let's make no mistake. I'm delighted that Indian youngsters are thinking of startups. I'm delighted that their facilities are very good. But for God's sake, let's not think India's problems will be solved by startups.
All right. Thank you so much.
A few grown-ups are helpful.
Thank you, Mr. R. Gopalakrishnan, Shweta Kothari and Rakesh Khar, my colleagues, for this riveting session. And like Mr. Gopalakrishnan said that he's more interested in those who are below 30. Onirban, please clap. All of us clap. Gurcharan Das sir. We are eternally young and so hungry for great ideas. Thank you very much, gentlemen and the lady, for this lovely session. Thank you indeed. And now, if I may request Ajay Bandyopadhyay to please come on to stage, convener of BELF, to felicitate Mr. R. Gopalakrishnan. Loud applause, below 30.
Merry Christmas, Grandpa.
Macaroons. She used to love macaroons. How can I eat this without her?
Merry Christmas, Grandpa.
Parker, the right gift.
Thank you.
It's anti-proof.
All right, we're moving on to our author session 4, and that is an economic narrative for Viksit Bharat. I have the pleasure of inviting on stage Mr. A.K. Bhattacharya. This session will take us straight to the heart of India's economic moment. As the country increasingly speaks of a Viksit Bharat, critical questions emerge. What does development truly mean? And which economic choice will shape India's future? To help us decode, of course, Mr. A.K. Bhattacharya, popularly known as AKB in journalistic circles, has graced these events. Please. And he's a veteran economic journalist, for those who don't know him very well. He has over 4 decades of experience. A.K. Bhattacharya has served as the editor of The Pioneer and Business Standard. He's currently editorial director at Business Standard, where he writes the influential column Raisina Hills. He's also the author of The Rise of Goliath and the multi-volume series on India's finance ministers. And I have the pleasure of taking this conversation with him. Give it up for AKB, please. All right.
Don't ask too many difficult questions, huh?
Not at all, sir. Needless to say, it's me in the dock here and more nervous to have you here, and the pleasure is, of course, mine. And so let me begin by asking a question that I think you get from everybody, and that is, you have seen India's economic story unfold, and you've had a front bench experience of it as an author, as an economic journalist. When I talk to you about Viksit Bharat, or when an average young person talk to you about Viksit Bharat, beyond the slogan, what does it truly mean to you?
Thank you very much for having me here. It's always a pleasure to talk to young people and also some eminent voices of Indian thought leadership. I think the idea of Viksit Bharat is probably not understood in its right context. When we talk about Vikasit, what do we mean? We need to understand it, and I have often wondered, what does it really mean? Does it really mean India's size of the economy becoming that of a developed country? Or does it mean that our per capita income will reach the level of whatever it is, $12,000 or $15,000 per capita? There is a tendency in popular discourse that Vikasit Bharat means India becoming the third largest economy and becoming a size of the economy which, if you translate that into whatever per capita level and everything, will reach there. My understanding of Vikasit is not just that. I think we need to be Vikasit without being unequal. Unfortunately, at this stage, I don't get inspired by this extreme lack of inequality, which is actually a big constraint in our becoming Vikasit. And I don't think policy reforms are adequate at this point in time to address that inequality, to make India a truly Vikasit Bharat by 2047. There are estimates of whether it's an 8% growth or a 9% growth that will take us to that level of being a Vikasit. But I think there are many other parameters, and one of the big parameters is how unequal we remain when we become Vikasit. Now, you might argue that the US is also unequal, but certainly US is less unequal than India at this point in time. And one data point, which is available by the latest numbers, coming from, if I'm not mistaken, from the government estimates only, which is that just 10% of India's population has got a 58% share in India's total income. I'm not talking even about the wealth. Wealth, I think it is larger. So if 10% of the Indian economy people have a share of 58% of income, it does constrain India's growth potential. Why? Because I think what happens is that a small cohort of people are becoming the market. 90% of the people are not really the market. So they also don't contribute to the kind of demand sustenance that is necessary. So if we cannot change that equation by making sure that their participation of if not 10%, if not 50%, 60%, at least 30%, 40%, we will not be able to sustain this growth. And that is one big worry. And the consequent to that worry is that how we are seeing a gradual demise of entrepreneurship. I know we talked about startups, but I think the sons and daughters of India's business leaders are not showing the kind of skill in entrepreneurship as they are showing in their skills in financialization of the economy. Everybody is becoming a financial investor, And I'm not opposing the idea of financialization, but what I'm saying is this, that if just 10% of the population is actually indulging in more financial investments, you are not really contributing the kind of growth that you need to become a Vikasit Bharat.
Thank you for putting that in context, and very beautifully so. So we are debating, of course, growth versus inclusion, and I think that is where the big hurdle lies on how do we make India more inclusive, how do we ensure a more equitable distribution of wealth. And in your assessment to that point, has India managed to find a balance between market reforms and social welfare? Because that's also a problem that many states face and the center has also faced over years. Market reforms versus social welfare, or do you think we lean too far in one favor?
I think what has happened is that our reforms have been more driven by crises. Whenever we have been in crises, we have gone in for reforms. And that regret is that in spite of the so-called 35 years or 36 years of reform story, we have not embraced reforms through a consensus-based approach. What we have done is that if there is a crisis, we immediately go in for reforms. If there is Mr. Trump, we start talking about tariff reforms. Now, till all this time, 2017 onwards, nobody was talking about tariff reforms in this country. Nobody was talking about engaging with the world through proper agreements on investment and trade. Nobody was talking about encouraging more foreign investment into this country so that, so I think just because Mr. Trump is now giving us some trouble, we are going in for tariff reforms. Something similar happened in 1991 when we are in dire straits, balance of payment problem, the fiscal indiscipline. So we went in for those major reforms. So I think we need, and the nation has failed itself by not creating a body of opinion which suggests that reforms have to be a continuous process. So when you talked about market reforms, I think we have been very, very slow and we have been very partial. And even if you look at the latest bit of reforms on the labor codes, now are these reforms what we wanted? Of course we wanted them, but if you look at the incrementality of it, I do not know at what point it will start bearing fruit. We still are not far away from our land reform. We had the agricultural reforms, but we rolled them back. There is no reason why agricultural reform cannot be rolled out once again.
Okay.
So I think market reforms are not getting the kind of importance by the policymakers as it should. On the contrary, social welfare schemes are getting the kind of support from government that was once talking about questioning about revenues. Now, if you look at the kind of assembly election that we have seen, we are all seeing that the revenues are being given in different forms, and there's a fight over revenues. So I think
who can give them more?
Revenue is essentially social welfare.
Exactly. So who gives more revenues?
Exactly. So therefore, or who tries to empower the woman more with more money, not by creating capacity, but by transferring cash. So I think our social welfare has been used for electoral purposes, and our market reforms have not gained the kind of momentum that we need to actually keep and realize the potential of this country.
AKB, what would you tell those naysayers or those people who will often cite the fact that the government did roll out agriculture reforms but was forced to take it back given the complexity of India's democracies? It becomes hard to implement reforms. As you rightly pointed out, labor reforms, not there yet, agriculture reforms taken back, rolled back. And so therefore, reforms only kick in when we are in dire straits because we have no other alternative. And that is to do with how complex India's democracy is?
Well, I don't think it is very complex. I'm sorry, I'm disagreeing with you a little bit. I think we often underestimate the importance of process in undertaking reforms. Take the example of agricultural reforms. They were well-intentioned. But I think, did we follow the right process? I don't think we followed the right process.
So you think we missed the process of
the
consultation?
The process is because what we thought was that because of the COVID time, we can ram down a reform without proper consultation, discussion, taking people on board. COVID time was not a crisis time, in a crisis of a different nature, but not crisis for the country.
Right.
So, but the government in its wisdom thought that, well, this is an opportunity for me to just ram it down the throats of the people. And a small section, mind you, Western UP, Punjab and Haryana. The rest of the country was absolutely fine with those agricultural reforms.
That's right.
So just small segment of people were politically more vocal. They managed to bring that down. Now, could the government have said that, let's have discussion, let's have give and take? Reform is also about, a kind of a give and take. You give some and take some. I don't think that was impossible. So I think in reform, you have to understand the importance of process. And I'm sorry to say that this importance has not been fully recognized by not just this government, but even in the previous governments.
So backdoor creeping in of bills as opposed to stakeholder consultation, perhaps that is what led to eventual rollback of agricultural reforms. And on reforms, from 1991, and since you've tracked reforms very closely in your books, I have to ask you, what, in your assessment, were the biggest reforms that have set India on a developmental path?
Well, I think, what did we see in 1991? We saw some trade policy reform, we saw fiscal policy reform, we saw financial sector reform, and that took us some distance. And I think the successive governments, all coalition governments, carried on that reform. But did we do the factor market reforms? No, we did not. We did not. I mean, the finance minister who brought about those fundamental changes in economic policies in 1991 himself announced that our government will never introduce an exit policy in a country like India. Now that was the end of the story for labor market reforms. So they were taken up how many years later, in 2020. And 2020, the laws were passed. Once again, during COVID time, little consultation. But then there were groundswell of protest. So it took about 5 years of consultation, backroom, and I'm aware of it, that how the Labor Ministry worked with the trade unions and different state trade unions also. And today we have situation, something that should have been done in state 1991 was thought of in 2020, and it took about another 5 years to bring about this labor codes. But is it too little, too late? I don't know.
It is too late indeed, if not too little, very late, as a matter of fact. Now, I have to ask you, I mean, you've talked also about in your books, although I did not have time to read all of them, I tried as much as I could. You've talked about bureaucratic complexity. This government has also talked about red tapeism. Now, in your assessment, do you believe in the last 10 years, have we moved towards perhaps a simpler, less bureaucratic administration? Or do you think we have a very long road ahead of ourselves when it comes to, the red tapeism with our bureaucracy?
I was just talking about it with Mr. Gurcharan Das. One of the areas where the Modi government has not taken progressive steps. On the contrary, they have actually fallen back on that yardstick, is civil services reforms. Although there were hopes that civil services reforms will take place at a good pace because the Prime Minister was seen as interacting with the bureaucracy. But unfortunately, I don't see civil reforms have just moved even an inch. On the contrary, what I do find is that the bureaucratic stranglehold over governance processes have only increased. So, to such an extent that, currently, your entire financial sector regulatory system is governed and led by a team of bureaucrats which presented last budget. So, you might say that, oh, it's a great jugalbandi that's going on, that the economic affairs secretary is the insurance sector regulator, the revenue secretary is the RBI governor, and the finance secretary is the markets regulator, SEBI. You may say it's a great achievement, but do you really believe that a civil servant who has got strong connection with the government can actually act as an independent regulator? He needs to take decisions
and regulate the government.
Regulate this thing. You have a payments regulator. And in the payments regulator, apart from the RBI governor, you have two other regulators who are serving bureaucrats. You have DGCA, which is supposed to be an independent, statutorily empowered civil aviation regulator. But you go into the website, you will find that DGCA is described as an attached office of the Civil Aviation Ministry. Now, what does it tell you? That we have brought about reforms, we have got about market reforms, so to say, but we have still remain under the stranglehold of the civil servants who decide that who should be the regulator, and it is a very good posting for the most civil servants. After retirement or just a couple of years before retirement, you become the regulator. Good old days, they used to be sent to the IMF and the World Bank as executive director, but these days they are sent to as a regulatory chairman.
So not very subtle there when it comes to moving from
Absolutely.
one plush position to another plush position. But I have to ask you, going back to the 3 books that you've written on India's finance minister and tying it in with what you said, you have chronicled the journey of India's finance ministers. Which finance minister, in your assessment, has done the best job at it? I'm not asking you to rate them, but perhaps which finance minister, when you chronicle their journey, stood out when it came to reforms, when it came to ensuring that there is more transparency, that there is more division of power, and an organization that in a way lives up to the expectation, as you pointed out, where a economic or a revenue secretary ends up heading perhaps an RBI, or a regulator ends up operating out of a ministry's own compound. So in your assessment, which of these finance ministers, if one or two, if you could name them, in your assessment stood out when it comes to doing a good job with Indian economy?
Well, this is not a very difficult question at all, because I think if you look at the last, 28 or 25 finance ministers that India has seen so far, who have presented a budget each, at least, I think Manmohan Singh stands out, very clearly. There cannot be any doubt about it, for good reasons, because one is what he did. Those 100 days after 1991 crisis hit us, but also because for the next 4 years, in spite of huge political pushback, he maintained and personal attack on him on the Harshad Mehta security scam. He stuck to his broad philosophy of unshackling the economy. But I think the real answer, another way of looking at is, who is the most underappreciated finance minister? And I think that underappreciated finance minister is Yashwant Sinha.
Okay.
Because that person, with a prime minister who was not always by his side, and please remember that a finance minister is as successful as he gets the support from the prime minister. I mean, Manmohan Singh wouldn't have been what Manmohan Singh was without a prime minister like Narasimha Rao. But Yashwant Sinha, who did not enjoy his full support of his prime minister, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, managed to bring about the kind of reforms. I think people don't appreciate him enough.
Okay. Now, at the beginning of the conversation, you've set the stage for what are the challenges when it comes to Viksit Bharat. Let me also bring in some of the contemporary challenges that we were talking about. That includes, technology flux, global supply chain disruption. We're looking at, a decadal shift when it comes to AI, what AI can do, how it's going to take away jobs. So, given all the present constraints, what is the sustainable path forward to a Viksit Bharat?
I think I'm not really competent to answer this very, very deep question of yours, but let me try. I think we have to understand that we haven't paid enough attention to what I call broadly social infrastructure. What do I mean by social infrastructure? I mean by health, by education, and I would include even water there. And these days, since I'm coming from Delhi, I would say air pollution. Now, I think these are all social infrastructure that we have failed to create. Our failure to create strong social infrastructure in these areas of health, education, including skilling and reskilling, and water and air, we may continue to grow. As with India's demographic dividend being what it is, till 2040, 6% growth is par for the course. So it's important that we pay more attention to these 3-4 areas of social infrastructure and make sure that the biggest challenge is what, in my view, in a country which is for the last 40 years or so, we have seen there is no formalization of the economy as far as workforce is concerned. In India, still 10% of its population of workforce is formal, 90% informal, out of which 48% in agriculture, overpopulated, overdependent on agriculture. So we must create avenues by which we make greater formalization, and 2, we take away people away from agriculture, maybe through skilling, through education, and divert them to the industrial sector, where, as Mr. Gopalakrishnan was pointing out, we still have around 12 to 15% of our economy is industry.
Okay. We've talked a lot about what needs to change. I also want to know from you, what are you most optimistic about? Having tracked India's development journey for the last 4 decades, and I'm assuming many, many more decades to come, what in your assessment makes you most optimistic about India's growth story? Because it's something that every financial institution in the world is talking about. India, the beacon of shining light at the end of the tunnel, an economy that stands out, that continues to be resilient, one of the fastest growing major economies in the world. And I believe all of those are headlines, and as Rakesh pointed out, we love to churn out headlines in the media. But when you deeply study some of these economic transitions, what makes you most optimistic about India's growth story?
I think as people, I'm very optimistic.
I think we should all give it up for that. People.
I'm optimistic about India's people, and I also believe that with whatever its faults, a democratic polity is something that needs to be preserved at all costs, and I hope we retain that democratic polity which our preamble talked about.
Is that something you're concerned about?
I am concerned about that, because I think...
In what ways, sir?
In what way? In the sense that is very important that India's plurilateral character needs to be preserved, maintained, and protected in many ways. Without that, India will not what India has been. So, very important.
Okay, the buzzer has gone off, and I do have a couple of quick rapid-fire questions for you. Right? Okay. Shall we? All right.
Yeah.
So, I think the first you've already answered, and that is the most underrated finance minister in Indian history.
I think I gave you Yashwant Sinha.
Yashwant Sinha.
I wouldn't have named Mr. Chidambaram, because Mr. Chidambaram is not underrated. He is you know, probably a little over. Yeah.
Okay. A reform that India needs urgently but hasn't dared to pursue.
Education reform, particularly in the primary and the middle education sector.
Okay.
Not so much in the higher education. We have got a new educational regulatory body, but my fear is that you will very soon find another retired civil servant heading that.
Okay.
Instead of a proper educator coming and guiding its fortunes. But I think the primary and the secondary education sector requires immediate fixing, which will ensure that India becomes you know, a good place where you can get vocational training and skilling.
All right. One economic myth about India that you hope people would stop believing.
It's a difficult one. I think, you know, India will, you know, become the third largest economy soon.
But that doesn't change the fortunes on ground.
On the ground, and we still remain an unequal society.
Okay, okay, fair enough. A decade in India's economic journey you would like to most revisit?
1991 to 1999.
Okay. Market forces or state intervention, what defines India's growth story?
A mixed economy, in my view.
Mixed
right
economy.
Through, even now.
Okay. And if you had to describe India's economy in one word right now?
Vibrant.
Vibrant it is. And your prediction, what will India's most significant economic achievement be by 2047?
If it can bring down the informal workforce in the economy from 90% to 50%.
That would be a great achievement.
Yeah.
AKB, thank you very much, everybody.